Dear friends, colleagues, esteemed audience, and students. Today, our revered speaker is Professor P. Kanak Sabhapati. Professor Kanak Sabhapati, a professor, author, writer, and social worker, is known for his pioneering field studies in industrial and business clusters in different parts of the country. He is involved in studying the Indian economic, social, business, and management systems from the native perspectives. Professor Kanak Sabhapati was director of the Tamil Nadu Institute of Urban Studies. He also served as the elected president of Tamil Nadu Agricultural Cooperative Bank. Professor Sabhapati obtained doctorate in finance as a UGC research fellow. Professor Kanak Sabhapati has written 5 books and published number of papers and articles in national and international journals and magazines of repute. His books are recommended as text and reference materials in IIM Bangalore, IIT Mumbai, and also in several Indian and foreign universities. He is associated with several universities and institutes in different capacity and connected with activities of various social and spiritual organizations. His book, Indian Models of Economy, Business and Management, has gathered lot of accolade as a pioneering work in field of functioning model of economic development in Indian tradition. I, Dr. S.K. Misra, Chair Professor, feel proud of welcoming Professor Kanak Sabhapati from the core of my heart on behalf of Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay Chair, Faculty of Social Sciences, Banaras Hindu University, to deliver his insightful and thought-provoking lecture on a very relevant topic in current Indian scenario, that is self-reliant India, why and how. Now I invite Professor Kanak Sabhapati for his esteemed lecture.
Able to see? 1 minute. Yeah, it's now getting ready. Puja, ஒரு நிமிஷம் வா. நாலுல வச்சிருக்கேன். 3 4. Is it okay? Close பண்ணிடு. Okay. Okay, my dear. Okay, thank you. இல்ல அப்புறம் அவங்க 5 மணிக்கு வந்தாங்கன்னா 6:30 வரைக்கும் இருக்கு. 7 வரைக்கும். நீ 5 மணிக்கு வந்துருவீல்ல, அதுக்குள்ள கீழே இருக்க இருந்துடாத. அனுப்பிடு. ஹலோ, சொல்லுங்க அண்ணாச்சி. ரொம்ப மகிழ்ச்சி. ரொம்ப மகிழ்ச்சி சின்ன அண்ணாச்சி. சரி, நல்லா பண்ணிடலாம். ஓகே, சரி. வைபவ், வைபவ். Okay, so my voice is coming in video, so I can start. So professor will do say some words or what? What is the system? Oh, he has completed. Okay, then audio is not coming to me. Okay, I don't know. Okay, but okay, okay. Dear Professor Mishra, respected professors, dear scholars, students and friends, I am extremely happy to be here with you to share my thoughts on self-reliant India, how and why. I am very happy that I am speaking to the learned audience arranged by the Kashi Hindu Vishwavidyalaya, situated in one of the most holiest places of our Bharat, namely Varanasi. In Tamil Nadu, every Tamilian would like to visit Kashi at least once in their lifetime. This is their dream. I am from Coimbatore, and there is a holy town called Avinashi, where Lord Ishvara is the main deity. This Avinashi is called Kasi for Western Tamil Nadu. So there is a saying in Tamil here that those who are not able to go to Kashi should go to Avinashi. So this is the connection. So I am very happy that I am speaking to the Kashi Vidyapith faculty members, students, and other invitees. First of all, I pay my pranams to the great nationalist leader, Bharat Ratna, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya ji, who promoted this very important university. And the center which is organizing this program is named after another great son of India, namely Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyaya, who even in 1960s propounded this integral humanism. You know, when the Western ideologies, both the ideologies, namely the Western capitalism and the communism, were dominating the global landscape, it was Pandit Deen Dayal ji who propounded this integral humanism based on our Bharatiya value systems. And it is high time that we remember him today, because the whole concept of self-reliance is his main dream for our country. And Tamil Nadu has a lot of connections with Banaras Hindu University. Two of the vice chancellors of the formative years, Dr. P.S. Sivasamy and Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, were from Tamil Nadu. So I am extremely happy that I am talking to all of you here in a program organized by Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Center. Today's topic is self-reliant India, how and why. In fact, the concept of self-reliance has become more relevant now than the earlier times. All of us know now we are in a very critical time. This COVID-19 has affected all of us in the world. But this COVID-19, in spite of the difficulties, has taught us a few important lessons. And one of the most important lessons in economics that we learned is that the Western ideologies have no place anywhere, more so in India, hereafter. We all know that the Western ideologies, namely communism and capitalism, have lost their significance a few decades back. In 2008, when the global economic crisis affected the world, especially the richer parts of the world, Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate in 2008, he was at that time professor of economics at the Princeton University, he wrote, "Much of our economic theories of the past 30 years, our meaning West," he was mentioning his own country and other countries. He said, "Much of our economic theories of the past 30 years have proved to be harmful to the society." This is what he said. A Western economist, a trained economist, a Nobel laureate from America, he himself openly admitted that all their economic theories have not only failed, but have proved to be harmful to the society. Now, with the coronavirus lockdown, the West has understood that their economic theories, their economic approaches have completely failed. In fact, some of us may know that the WTO, World Trade Organization, which they have created, especially the West, particularly the US was driving it, has no president now, chairman now. Somebody resigned from that post one and a half months back, and There is no replacement even today. This is because the World Dispute Settlement Board in WTO, which is responsible for resolving all disputes relating to trade, have no judges. Countries like America, Japan have refused to appoint judges. So with the result now, the Western economic approaches have proved to be failures. This is the position. As a result, President Trump and other Western leaders, they speak about nationalism. They say that openly, they are saying that we have to make production within our country. So even the West have now understood that the self-reliant approach is the best approach to them. We have to remember that India is not just a country, it's a civilization, ancient civilization, perhaps the longest living civilization in the whole world. A civilization with thousands of years of history. Indian civilization could not have continued for so long without strong economic fundamentals. So if we study Indian economy of the ancient periods, we know that at least for the last 5,000, 6,000 years, we have details. We have details that show as to how Bharat remained as a powerful nation even in the earlier periods. All of us know the first economics book was written here in Takshashila about 2,300 years back. There, Kautilya quotes 300 and at least more than 100 authors before him. So according to my own calculation, I come to understand that the books that he quoted must have been at least 300, 350 years older before his time. So we come to know that economics as a subject must have at least some 26 centuries, 27 centuries of background. So this is India. And as a result, we remained as a powerful nation because of our self-reliant approach. Now we know for the last 2 millennia, we have economic details, GDP details, growth rate details, with comparison to other countries. OECD undertook this study in 1980s. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is the group of rich countries, they wanted to know as to how the economies of different countries moved up and came down during the last 2,000 years. Because for the Westerners, 2,000 years is the maximum period. So they undertook a study under the chairmanship of one Angus Madison, and a well-known economic historian. So this study went for about 16 years, and after about 16, 17 years, they released this in the form of a book report. Then it came in the form of a book also. The title of that report is The World Economic History, a Millennial Perspective. So the report clearly says that during the beginning of the Common Era, now we are in the 2020th year of the Common Era. So India was contributing 32.9% of the global GDP. So 1/3 of contribution was by us, India, which is the highest in the world at that time. China was behind us, contributing 26.2%. And we were the two powerful nations. Asia, countries surrounding us, including Japan, were contributing about another 17%. So as a result, it was an India-driven, Asia-dominated economy. Asia was contributing 76%. India was contributing 33%. And India as a superior nation, China following it, and these two countries dominating the global economy continued for almost 17 to 18 centuries without interruption, with India at the top most of the time. So we were a very powerful economy. We were a very sustainable economy. This is the point that we have to understand. We were not just powerful, we remained as the most sustainable economic power in the world for several centuries together. And what is the reason? The emphasis was on self-reliance. We had international relations, but at the same time, Indian economy was completely self-reliant. So as a result, India remained the most prosperous nation, most productive nation in the whole world. It is not just in agriculture, it's in industry, it's in services sector, it's in education, it's in technology, it's in shipbuilding. So several areas. But unfortunately, the colonialists came here and started systematically destroying our economy like the way they did in the rest of the world also. As a result, we were made a poor nation, an underdeveloped nation. So at the time of independence, India's contribution to global economy was just 4%, 4.2%. And we were a pioneering nation in the field of education. But our education system was systematically, completely destroyed. As a result, in 1891, our literacy rate was estimated to be just 9%. But when the Britishers came here and started collecting details, they themselves said India's literacy rate was highest in the world. It was estimated to be about 75%. So in a period of less than 7 decades, we were made an illiterate, poorly literate nation. This is because of the systematic destruction. But if you see the last 70 years, in the last 70 years, you leave the economic problems now. Everybody has this problem today. The last 70 years, we have emerged as the third most important economic power in the world. In terms of PPP, GDP, we are the third largest economy in the world. Our GDP is more than $10 trillion in PPP terms. And London Business School a few years back had estimated that India has the largest number of entrepreneurs. At that time, they estimated it was 85 million, 8.5 crore. So as a result, all the international agencies, research bodies, they unanimously predict that India would be the most potential economic power in the future. Even in the corona times, if you see today, of course, we are all having huge problems. The rest of the world also has problems. But if you see India today, when the coronavirus broke out, when it was announced in the month of March, 2nd of March, we were not prepared. Nobody was prepared because we did not know that this kind of virus would attack us. As a result, we did not have these personal protective equipments that our doctors, medical staff, sanitary staff wear. So we had to import. But today, what is this position? Now, June 30th, 2020, 14 days, 15 days back, Government of India has given permission to export 5 million PPP medical overalls to the Indian manufacturers. Can you imagine? 3 months back, 3.5 months back, we did not have PPEs. We had to import. But today, our Indian manufacturers are making PPEs for the entire country. Even last month, it was announced that they were making 6 lakh pieces per day, PPEs in India. And by the end of June, now Government of India has given permission for exports. When the entire nation was affected by coronavirus and we were all locked in, we were all inside, we were asked to remain inside because if we go outside, corona might catch us. There are a set of entrepreneurs who started working on it and then not just started, engaged in making it. And today we have become self-sufficient, not just self-sufficient, we are exporting. This happened within a period of less than 4 months. This is India. This is self-reliant India. So India has always remained self-reliant. We have been taking up studies in different parts of our country, especially the industrial business economic clusters for the last 24, 25 years. And we see a different kind of India that we study in textbooks, that we discuss in conference rooms, seminars, etc. Because whatever India that we see in textbooks are based on largely the Western approaches, and then ideas. But there is other India, that is what we call functioning India. In fact, it is performing India, which unfortunately the educational institutions and even largely the policy makers are not aware of. But now in the recent periods, recent months, of course, there are a lot of steps being taken. For about 60-65 years, this functioning India was not taken into account to a very large extent. You take the economic map of India. If you see the industrial, business, service sectors especially, there are about 5,000 to 6,000 clusters. Clusters are centers of business, centers of economic activities, where hundreds of units engaged in same or similar or different kinds of businesses are situated. They are largely similar, but there are diverse business activities in a cluster also. There are clusters, 5,000, 6,000 clusters. It is very difficult to estimate because there are many small, big clusters. And if you take these clusters, then we can understand the significance of their performance. We can understand how they make India self-reliant. You take, for example, Surat. We can take any cluster. There are in Uttar Pradesh many number of clusters. Like Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh has large number of small and medium enterprises. There are many, many centers. Agra is a very, very important center. Kanpur is a very important center. Even Varanasi, you have this handloom textiles. In fact, Uttar Pradesh is known for very fine handloom varieties in the entire country. And you have Mathura, brassware cluster. It's a brassware cluster. Moradabad. Moradabad brassware cluster. Mathura, you have these brass statues. So there are many, many, many clusters. In Kanpur, you have 150-year-old tannery leather cluster. Agra, if you take, I was surprised when I learned that per month they make 50 lakh pieces of shoes, mostly handmade shoes, highest quality shoes. And it was earlier known for castings, diesel engines, etc. You may be interested to know that India is the second largest producer of footwear in the world. In the entire world, India makes 2,200 crore pairs of different categories of footwear every year. So there are about 15,000 estimated units, and there are some unregistered units also in different places manufacturing this footwear. Turnover was estimated to be 50,000 crores, with exports running to the tune of 18,000 crores. So these are all few examples for clusters. So if you take Punjab, there is Ludhiana, Gujarat, there is Surat, Tamil Nadu, there is Coimbatore, Tirupur, Sivakasi, and then Karnataka, Belgaum. There are hundreds and hundreds of clusters like this. And if you tease these clusters, they are all self-made. After independence, mostly after independence, some of them just before, earlier to independence also, our people, our local societies, they promoted units in all these places. And it is these clusters that are dominating the Indian economy today. There are agricultural clusters also. And it is these clusters that are dominating the Indian economy today. If you take, for example, Surat, there are two main businesses there. One is diamond activity. Second one, textile activity. If you take textile activity, there are thousands of textile showrooms selling saris alone. Saris. There are an estimated 30,000 wholesale shops selling saris alone. Their turnover last year was 90,000 crores. I was there 3 months back. I met the top exporters, businessmen. They were telling me, sir, turnover last year was 90,000 crores. Another business, diamond business, last year turnover was 80,000 crores. Today we are dominating in the international diamond market. It is the Indians who dominate the international diamond market. International diamond capital is in Belgium, in a city called Antwerp. More than 2/3, more than 70% of the international diamond business takes place through Indians. So I was speaking about Surat. In Surat, textile industry turnover 90,000 crores, diamond business turnover 80,000 crores, one city, two businesses, turnover 1,70,000 crores. So this is how in India different businesses function. You take even in the case of Moradabad, I was going through, I saw that 80% of its brassware are exported. There is a very well-known hosiery center in Tamil Nadu, which is called Tirupur. About 40 to 45% of India's knitwear exports go from here. So these centers are completely self-made, promoted by the local societies, especially the people in the local areas. It is they who promote this business, and it is they who developed this business in the last 50 to 60 years. And as a result, today we are emerging, we have already emerged as a very important player at the international level. So we have emerged as a very important economy also at the international level. And if you see the background, most of these businesses are in fact small and medium businesses. All of us know in the Indian economy, this SME sector contributes the majority share. And even in the SME sector, the small businesses are dominant. These small businesses, the Government of India's National Sample Survey, 73rd round, which was undertaken in 2015-16, says that there are about 63 million small businesses, largely small businesses, 6.3 crore businesses. And if you see these 6.3 crore businesses, they provide employment to the largest segment of people in India. It's more than 11 crore population, almost 11.5, 12 crore population, largest segment. If you take the organized sectors, private sector, government sector, they provide employment to less than 20 million people. So they provide the highest number of employment. And who promoted these small businesses? Very ordinary people in our societies. Very ordinary people. In fact, 66% of them belong to this OBC, SC/ST sector. They are very ordinary people, financially not sound. Educationally also, especially the promoters, are less educated, some of them even uneducated. We undertook a survey about 14 years back in Surat and Ahmedabad among the diamond exporters. You know, we came to know 23% of the top diamond exporters from Gujarat, they were illiterates. Can we believe it? But it is they who are dominating the business, not just Indian business, international business. Even in Tirupur, which is one of the top hosiery centers in India, apart from Ludhiana, if you see, a London Business School professor came here and undertook a study, and then he found out that about 70% of the exporters have studied below 11th standard, school education and below. In fact, 25% of them below 5th standard. But they are the exporters. It is these people who go and compete with the companies managed by the Ivy League MBAs from Harvard University and others in the international market, and then compete with them, emerge successfully. What is the reason? It is the business sense, economic sense. So our people have enormous economic and business sense. So it is these ordinary people, so-called ordinary people, who have promoted, who are responsible for running this business. Of course, now the second generation are comparatively highly educated people. Their children are entering into business and all. So the SME sector plays a very important role, and in the SME sector, you will be surprised to know 84% of the SME sector businesses, small businesses especially, are own account enterprises. Meaning what? Only the owner and his family members work there. Only the remaining units employ others. So this is the importance of this. And in spite of all difficulties, they have been growing year after year. Whether it is in Uttar Pradesh or Tamil Nadu, they have been growing year after year. 2010-11, the growth rate of these enterprises was 11%. Sorry, 10%, 9.9%. So this is how they have been growing. And as a result, India remains largely self-employed even today. The NSS 66th round says that 51% of the workforce in India is self-employed workforce. Vidura Nidhi said, Sage Vidura said, self-employment is the best status in life. So to a very large extent, Indians even today would prefer to remain as self-employed. In the modern times, people go and work for 5 years, 10 years, but even then their aim would be to develop, to promote their own units. So that, what is the reason? Video is not coming, no problem, no? Video also. Okay, so I'll continue. I'm very sorry, there is some technical problem. So as a result, even today, India would like to remain largely a self-employed society. So when we see the functioning India, performing India at the field level today, even today, in the 21st century, in 2020, we see a different picture. The picture is largely self-reliant India. And after this corona attack, as I mentioned earlier, now we have to understand a few important facts. And one is that these Western approaches have largely failed, have completely failed. So there is no use of depending on them. In fact, it is time for us to chart our own path, like the way our ordinary Indians, so-called ordinary Indians, are doing. Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya said long back, I quote, "We had taken pride in resisting things when the British ruled us. But strangely enough, now that they have left, Westernization has become synonymous with progress. So we have to change this attitude. That is why in the 1960s, Panditji espoused this integral humanism as a concept. Unlike the Western theories, our concept of integral humanism is based on wider aspect. Here, we include the family, we include the society, we include the larger national cause and the dharma that is governing all of us. That is how Bharat as a nation, as a civilization has survived. And even today, Bharat is largely surviving based on these fundamentals only. That is the reason why 70 years back when we got independence, we were a largely poor, underdeveloped, less literate country. But today, in the last 65 years, there were confusions and contradictions at the policy making level, because for about 35-40 years we were following this socialistic approach which was not suitable for us or anybody else in the world. Then immediately after socialism failed, we opted for this globalization approach, which again is not suitable for us. So as a result, we face difficulties. We are facing difficulties even today. But in spite of it, in spite of the confusions and contradictions, our Indians have been taking India in its own natural direction. This is what we have to understand. In spite of all these difficulties, the way the Indian society has been moving is based on our innate cultural, traditional strength. There was a very popular economist in America. His name was John Kenneth Galbraith. He was in India as US ambassador in the early 1960s when Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister of India here, and President Kennedy was the president in America. So he was here for 3 years, and later in 2001, he visited India. He went through different parts of our country, and before leaving for America, he gave an interview. And in that interview, he said, I have been observing India for the last 40 years as an economist, as a well-wisher. And what surprises me is the development of India at the local grassroots levels, at the local levels. He said, the Indian economy is largely driven by the people at the local levels due to their ingenuity, natural cleverness, and due to the culture of India. He mentioned this. Natural ingenuity and the culture of India is driving the Indian economy. And we as students, wherever we go and study this, we observe this. Everywhere we observe this. I was mentioning about clusters earlier, and in none of these clusters you see there is even a single dollar worth of foreign investment. There is no foreign investment here. You take Surat, total turnover 2 lakh crores. You take Coimbatore, a turnover would be around 1,50,000 crores. You take any center, there is no foreign investment. And that is how Bharat has been functioning for the last 70 years. And even if you take foreign investment in the last 30 years now, what is their share? Their share has always remained on an average less than 5%. Last, if I remember right, 2018-19, the total foreign investment inflows in India was just $30 billion, which is very, very minimum. In all these industrial business clusters, our people mobilize money locally through our own resources, through local resources. Then there are banks and financial institutions. All of us know that Indians save one of the highest amounts of money in the whole world. So our parents, our elders, they deem it as their duty to save as much money as possible so that their children will have better life, better education. So that is the reason why they save money. It is part and parcel of our life. Our elders do not feel that they have to get good food, good clothes, but rather they would prefer to give more facilities to the children for studying or create more enterprises for them so that after 10 years, 20 years, they will be able to enjoy the benefits of their labor. And this is how India has been functioning. So as a result, if you see today, if you see the nationalized banks saving deposit, it's more than 120 lakh crores. Can we believe it? And this is how we have been saving money. You take this Corona times. All of us know these Jan Dhan accounts. Jan Dhan accounts was opened. The scheme was initiated by the Prime Minister about 5 years back for those people who otherwise do not go to bank and open their accounts, because those people do not have money even to have that basic minimum amount to open the bank accounts. You will be surprised when I say this. Today in all their accounts, there are about 39 crore Jan Dhan accounts today. The amount of money that they have in their accounts is 1,32,000 crores. Can you believe it? This is the amount of money. And now, last month we have been studying this. We came to know that in the month of April alone, Corona period, April 2020, there were incremental deposits, additional deposits in their account to the tune of 22,000 crores. So our people, even in times of difficulty, they save money because it is our culture. So as a result, enormous amount of money is saved, and this money is used by others, by themselves, for their own activities, for creating enterprises, for saving in banks, etc. So this is how India has been growing. So this is our culture. Even our people who remain outside, NRIs, what we call NRIs, they send huge amount of money to India. Even in 2018, if I remember right, they sent about $76 billion, the highest amount of money sent by any group of people, any national group outside of their own country. So this is our habit, part and parcel of our life. And this is the reason why we create millions, lakhs and lakhs of enterprises in India every year. That is the reason why the number of small, micro enterprises have been growing. Even big units, companies. If you take the registered companies today, there are about almost 12 lakh companies. We have the second largest number of companies in the whole world. So whether it is small units or bigger units, and in many cases, the smaller units become medium becomes bigger. And this is how India has been growing. So we are largely a self-reliant society. But now that the situation has come and the government is openly advocating this nationalist self-reliant approach, it is time for us, the educated sections of the society, to understand this concept and then explain this to others. And here, as educationists, as people who are interested in the development of our country, we have to understand this basic fact. First of all, we have to know that, we have our own functioning, performing systems that is largely self-reliant. That is there even in the 21st century. I was mentioning about small, medium businesses, and it is not confined to small, medium businesses alone. Even in the case of big businesses, corporates, it is largely our own basic fundamentals that are driving the corporates. So whether you take saving, you take any American Western company, see their share capital reserve ratio, compare it with the Indian company share capital reserve ratio, you will understand. I'm a finance teacher. We always teach in classrooms based on Western theories that if a company has, let us say, a share capital to the tune of, say, $1 million, then it is enough if the company has a maximum of reserve to the tune of $2 million. So these reserves are kept to meet contingencies, unexpected events. So Western theories say even 1:1 is okay, but if you have 1:2, best, no problem. But you see Indian companies, always all the companies, Indian companies will have 50 times, 100 times, 200 times more reserve than the capital. Because this is our nature. Theories say 1:1 is okay. That is why Western companies will have this 1:1 or 1:2. If they accumulate some more reserve, they will distribute it in the form of bonus share. But in India, you have enormous amount of reserves in India. I know many companies, I don't have time, otherwise I would have explained to you. There is a Tamil Nadu-based company called Tamil Nadu Mercantile Bank. Its capital till 2016 was just 28 lakhs, but its reserves were to the tune of 150 crores. Enormous amount of reserve. So assuming that the company would incur loss from next year, but even then those type of companies would be able to continue for another 500 years, 600 years without any problem. And now they are distributing dividend to the tune of 900%, 1000%. So this is the difference between the Western corporates and the Indian corporates. And a few years back, professors from Kellogg University, they came here under the chairmanship of one Peter Capelli. They came here. They wanted to study the leadership pattern in Indian corporate sector. They met with the top 98 companies' chief executives, and after that they have written a report, and it has come in the form of a book also now. They wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review. You know what is the title of that article? Lessons from Indian Businesses. Leadership lessons from Indian businesses. So throughout their book, they discuss as to how the Indian corporate systems are superior to the Western systems. So this is how the Indian corporates also operate. So for the outside world, we may not understand this, but once we go inside and see, we can understand the basic fundamentals of our culture dominating this system. And this is the reason why now we are emerging as the top player at the international level. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat self-reliance concept is one that we have to take it up very seriously immediately. And as educationists, we have a huge role to play, because it is our duty to explain this concept to others, and then make them understand the significance of it. You know why this is necessary today? As I told you, India is 1/6 of the humanity. We cannot depend on others for everything. And we have a huge history. We were a completely prosperous nation for hundreds and hundreds of years based on our self-reliant approaches. Even today, in spite of all difficulties, in spite of all confusions at the top level for about 60-65 years, even today India remains largely self-reliant. We have to remember, for about 1,000 years, we were affected by the invaders and later the colonialists. It is the colonialists who completely destroyed our economic system. But in spite of it, within a period of 70 years, our people have seen to it that we are emerging as a powerful nation. So we have the ingredients, we have all the necessary characteristics that are required to make a nation self-reliant. Even today, we are, if you take our own innovations, huge innovations are taking place in industrial business clusters, local levels, huge innovation. I remember a few years back, Department of Science and Technology said that 30% of the innovations come from these so-called illiterate groups. I know we have documented some of these innovations, huge innovations. Only thing, the word jihad is becoming popular only now. This is there throughout the country, and our people are highly capable of doing many things, whether it is engineering, whether it is other kinds of activities. This is what we see from the practical experience. I'm not theoretical. We are all completely practical based on our experience in the last 20-25 years. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant, is important now, because now we cannot depend on Western countries. Their approaches, their ideologies have largely failed. And it is not suitable for us also. That is what Pandit Deendayal ji emphasized in the 1960s. So this we have to understand now. So why Atmanirbhar Bharat? It is important for every self-respecting Indian. This is important. And we have a history, we can stand on our own. We have functioning experience even today to a large extent. Some might ask, sir, can we depend completely, even today, Some of the items are we are getting from other countries, China, etc. Now we have to prepare ourselves for it. Already I know the government of India has started making preparations for it. Maybe in a few years we will be able to do it on our own. When we say self-reliant India, that does not mean we should not have connection with any other country. We can have. In fact, we should have. Bharat is always known for her Vasudeva Kudumbakam approach. We respect others, we help others. Even during this corona period, our country has helped more than 120 nations. And we have helped more than 40 nations by supplying free medicine, by providing our services free of cost. So we are all known for it. It does not mean that we have to ignore other countries. Oh, we have to respect them. We have to make friends with them. We have to help them, guide them wherever necessary. At the same time, whenever we have some good things from them, we have to learn from them, adapt from them. Self-reliant means standing on our own to a very large extent, to the maximum extent. And we are capable. After my 25 years of field studies, I can say that we are completely capable of becoming self-reliant. In some of the areas, maybe we have to work to prepare ourselves. Within a few years, we will be able to do it. So this is the reason why we emphasize this self-reliant approach. And we have to understand one more thing. For the Western world today, even for the rest of the world, there is no ideology, there is no philosophy before them to guide. And to a very large extent, we will be able to guide them. So our own approaches are not are going to help others also. This also we have to understand. How we have to do this self-reliant approach? Yes, this is very, very important. First of all, as academics, as people who are interested, who are involved in these academic affairs, I will suggest you to please see the functioning India and try to explain this to the outsiders, to the educated sections, to the allied groups as to how even today our ordinary Indians, our India functioning systems, performing systems are working. So this we have to explain to them. Even today, the self-reliant India is working in larger parts of our country. Last 3.5, 4 months, we have confined ourselves to our own local places. Are we functioning or not? We are functioning. We are depending on local kirana shops. We get our products from local places. So this kind of approach is good for our own country also. This is how we do, to the maximum extent possible. We try to get from our own localities. But of course, within our country, we go, we make, we sell, we manufacture. Now that the government of India is emphasizing creating facilities for infrastructural facilities for connecting Bharat as a whole, India as a whole, through these networks, shandies and all, we will be able to do business among ourselves. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India, is very important, and it is going to be the most important factor for us in the next 5 to 10 years, because once we decide to work on it, then I see a future wherein India will be at the top position in the near future. There is no doubt about it. But how we have to do it? As educationists, we have a role. First of all, we have to understand this India, functioning India, and explain this to us. Second, as educationists, what we have to do is we have to help our people, local economies, agriculture, small-scale industry, other industries, as to how they can improve themselves. And this is what we have to do. Now the problem is we don't have connection with the local society. It is unfortunate that even after 70 years, our education system to a very large extent remained rooted in the colonial Western approaches. Now we have to see that, we begin to understand our localities, our industries, our societies. And once we do this, once we start doing this, then, we will get this connection. And once we get this, then, immediately we can make concrete suggestions to them. I am saying this based on our own experience. Now we have connections with local societies, and we are local industries, and through small studies, by spending just few thousand rupees, we have helped industries to grow to the tune of crores of rupees every year, annually. This is possible. Only thing required is we have to go and study them from objective purposes, not from our own theoretical understanding. If we look at our own local societies, functioning of our local industries, it is very, very easy. I will give an example for a larger project. Government of Gujarat in 2003 invited us from Tamil Nadu to study this kite business, kite industry. The then Chief Minister, the present Prime Minister, was interested to develop that business. In fact, when we went there, it was just a cottage business, cottage industry. So at that time, the turnover we calculated was just 30 to 35 crores, kite business, small business. Ordinary people, especially women belonging to that minority community, they were largely there. So we did that study, and now the business has increased to 850 crore plus. So in a period of just about 15 to 16 years, huge 25 times, 26 times increase in business. Small study, and you see the business increase. This is at the state level. At the smaller level, we have done several studies, spending just 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 rupees. But businesses increasing to incremental additional profits increasing to say 5 crores, 3 crores, 10 crores. These are all possible. So as educated sections, academic groups, we have a huge role to play. And especially in the part of how this self-reliant approach, we have an important role. And especially I always have a feeling that Uttar Pradesh is a very large state. Not only that, Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu have many similarities, especially in this in culture and SME. I have seen one more thing, wherever these cultural roots are strong, there the SMEs, self-reliant nature of activities are also very high. So Tamil Nadu is land of temples. Similarly, Uttar Pradesh is land of holy places, holiest of holy places. Tamil Nadu is known for its MSMEs. Similarly, Uttar Pradesh is also known for its MSMEs. In the top 3 categories of MSME units in India, Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh come there. So it is our duty as the academic sections to study this aspect, particular aspect, and make suggestions to the local societies, to the government also, to improve these local economic activities so that India could be self-reliant as quickly as possible. Now at the ground level, India is largely self-reliant. As academics, it is our duty to understand that wherever gaps are there, in fact, these gaps are there mainly because there is no connection between the functioning India and the academic India, educated India. This is the problem. So it is our duty to go to them, to understand them, disseminate their information. One. Second is to understand their issues and then try to solve that issues, either through our own suggestions or through government. Actually, in my feeling, we academics have to serve as the conduit between the local societies and the policy makers. It is our duty, because otherwise people sitting in Chennai, Lucknow, Delhi, officials, they may not have time. So it is our duty to connect these groups so that India becomes self-reliant as quickly as possible. But I have a strong feeling, for about 60 years or so, we have neglected them. In academics, I know for many, many years, till even today, to a large extent, we don't discuss about the functioning India. But now it is time for us to reorient our approaches and to see what is happening at the ground level. So as a first step, we have to start that work. Start looking at India from the Indian Bharatiya perspectives. Once we look at India, then it will give a new orientation to us. Then it will drive us to go to them, to study them, to help them. And this is how, as academics, we can help Bharat to become a self-reliant nation. You know, Swami Vivekananda undertook a tour of India for about almost 3 years. And after completing his tour of India, Bharat Darshan, he came to Vivekananda Rocks in Kanyakumari, it's the southernmost part of Bharat. Sat there on the small hillock, today called as Vivekananda Rock. He meditated for 3 days during the end of that year, December. And after meditation, he woke up and said, I foresee a India where Bharata Devi shines with all her luxurious dress, jewelry in full bloom. I have a feeling that the time has come for us now to see a beautiful, prosperous Bharat in future, near future, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. But the time has come for us to see a new India in full stream. If we want to see that, it is our duty to contribute as much as possible for this self-reliant concept, Atmanirbhar concept. And we are all privileged people, educated sections, English educated sections. We are traditional also. We understand the tradition of this country, great culture of this country, especially the Varanasi people, and then people like us from Tamil Nadu. We know the cultural roots of our nation. We have the modern education also. We know the modern economy, modern business systems. So it is our duty to connect these two things. To study India, to study Bharat in its own functioning perspectives, and then present it to the world as to how India is functioning even today. And the second and most important aspect is to make it completely self-reliant, so that we will become the most important player in the world in the near future. So for which, of course, there are people to help us. To the maximum extent possible, some of us who are engaged in this kind of work in field studies, we are willing to help. We are willing to come anywhere and help. But it is our duty to do this. So my appeal to all of you, the participants in today's webinar program, is this: please look at India from our own Bharatiya perspectives, and then start making contributions for the self-reliant approach, because the self-reliant approach is nothing new to India. It is part and parcel of our culture, part and parcel of our tradition. Unfortunately, in the last so many years, due to various influences, we had to move away to a large extent, especially the educated sections. Now it is time for us to realize. And once we start doing this, then we will be the number one. We need not worry too much about China. Of course, short-term, medium-term implications will be there, but in the long run, India will emerge as the most powerful nation in the whole world. Thank you very much. Do I have to answer questions, my dear, or over? Okay, so I can leave. Okay. Okay. Was it okay? I was able to. Okay.